So let's think about the impact of trauma on meaning and spirituality. And, that impact goes in both ways. So trauma can shake up our sense of meaning and spirituality. It also, our spirituality and meaning, can impact trauma and how we cope with it. Judith Herman, who we've talked about several times this semester, says trauma can violate people's faith in a natural or divine order and cast them into a state of existential crisis where they lose faith in an all-powerful and good God, recognize that their world is anything but safe and well-ordered, and begin to believe that they are bad and deserving of bad outcomes. These are things that we need to recognize if we're working with someone with a history of trauma, and we need to challenge. So what happens during meaning making? Crystal Park, who is a graduate of our program, talked about the difference between global meaning, so things like the world is a safe place, I can be supported, people are there for me, I have control over what happens in my life, and situational meaning. In this given situation, this happened, and it had this kind of impact. So trauma, the situation, is appraised. We try and make sense of it. Is this something bad or not? Is it relevant to us or not? Does this, if we, for example, believe that the world is a safe, good place, and yet we've been hurt by someone in this world, how do we make sense of that? So is there, this discrepancy? And if we're able to integrate it, we say, yeah, there are some bad people, but most people are good. That doesn't cause any or minimal stress. On the other hand, if we're saying, I thought the world was a good place, but apparently not, that's going to cause us a lot of distress and push us into this meaning-making process, where we're trying to make meaning of that stressor, which may then cause changes in our global meaning. So rather than continuing to think that the world is a good place, we now think, it's not so good. So think about this in terms of Salman Rushdie. Remember, he was attacked while he was preparing to give a talk. Someone rushed him on stage with a knife and struck him in his eye and his hand and near his heart. And he says violence smashes that picture, his worldview. Suddenly, we don't know the rules, what to say, how to behave, what choices to make. Survivors no longer know the shape of things. Reality dissolves and is replaced by the incomprehensible. Fear, panic, paralysis take over from rational thought. Thinking straight becomes impossible because in the presence of violence, people no longer know what thinking straight might be. We become destabilized, even deranged. Our minds no longer know how to work. So think about his experience given the meaning-making world. Did he experience a discrepancy? At this point, has he found some adaptive meaning, or is he still struggling to do so? We've talked about Tara Westover and her attempts to make sense of the real physical abuse that she experienced at the hands of her brother, and her mother ignoring her or ignoring this in the next room. On the one hand, my brother brings me ice wrapped in a dish towel and says, next time we're having fun, I should tell him if something is wrong. Was it really fun and games? Could he not tell that he was hurting me? And think about what she can do to make sense of this discrepancy. How can she move on? So trauma shakes things up, right? And we can assimilate it. We can say, I'm a good person, so nothing bad can happen to me. You know, people are generally kind and benevolent, or this is what I deserve. Or we can accommodate. So we can shift our view of what's going on. So we may say, you know, being healthy and capable is important to me, but now I'm permanently disabled. Or I'm worthless and bad things inevitably happen to me. We may also experience some post-traumatic growth. So as a result of this experience, I've become stronger and more compassionate towards others suffering. So if we are working with someone with a history of trauma, part of what we need to do is help them make sense of that trauma and move it in a direction that is helpful for them. So it's not just assimilation or accommodation, but is it adaptive or maladaptive? So if it's assimilation and adaptive, we can experience some recovery or resilience. But if not, we're going to experience chronic struggle. If we're experiencing accommodation and that new meaning is adaptive, we can experience recovery or post-traumatic growth. On the other hand, if it's maladaptive, we're going to experience, you know, a nuanced set of symptoms or maybe chronic struggle. And we want to find some way to help people make adaptive, tell adaptive stories about what's going on in their lives. Kara Westover says, only then did I understand where the shame had come from. It wasn't that I had studied in a marble conservatory or that my father wasn't a diplomat. Here she is in England at Oxford, or that my father wasn't, it was that my dad was half out of his mind. It wasn't, or that mother followed him. It had come from having a father who shoved me towards the chomping blades of the shear instead of pulling me away from them. It had come from those moments on the floor, from knowing that mother was in the next room, closing her eyes and ears to me, and choosing for that moment not to be my mother at all, not to protect her. Again, think about the advantages and disadvantages about these stories that she's telling herself. Right? So let's tie this back to spirituality. Spirituality, meaning stories can be a problem. So, you know, meaning in spirituality can be related to moral injury and vice versa, our strength and healing, or we can experience strength and healing or pain and struggle. When we experience pain and struggle, we're going to experience a weakening of faith, a loss of resources for connection and coping, use of maladaptive coping strategies, and increased struggle across time. You know, so if I'm saying God has abandoned me, that's, you know, God doesn't believe in me, then I'm going to experience pain and struggle. On the other hand, our spirituality, meaning, and story can be part of the solution. So it can help us develop a stronger way of looking at our world, maybe a more accurate way. It can help us feel more connected and belonging, which is one of the things that religion often provides. It can be a source of healthy coping and lifestyle practices. Often religion tells us what things to do in order to stay healthy. And our spiritual coping, prayer, ritual, meditation, forgiveness can be helpful and can be useful for us. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you in the next video.